It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Dax is playing Cardi Spin Cash with Quark. More accurately, she's trying to play, but he's more interested in stock market movements. Understandable, really, when the result is him having everything he's got left wiped out, which is going to be quite the problem given all of his debts. He's got a week to clear them before he loses the bar, and to make matters worse, the cousin who tried to murderize him with a sabotaged shuttle has just turned up. His name's Gala, and Dax buggers off at his prompting so he and Quark can talk business. Him even being here is against the Ferengi ban on associating with Quark, so it's only fair to hear him out. Gala here sells weapons, something Quark has always been hesitant to involve himself in. Gala thinks he's found a solution to Quark's concerns, though, and it's not like he's got a lot of choice in the matter at the moment. O'Brien's not being left with much choice either. Little Kirayoshi, his new son, is proving quite difficult while Keiko's on Bajor. Being put down even for a moment results in crying, and handing him over for Jake to babysit gives the same result, which leaves O'Brien taking him to work. Back to Quark's we go, where Quark is being introduced to Gala's associate. A famous face deserves a silly name, so let's drag out the wheel again and slap one on him. We'll be using the name Smashed Badger, given to us by Admiral Sam Vimes. Smashed Badger is here to see what Gala's proposal is, and to be fair, it's a pretty good one. Quark's holosuites make an excellent demonstration ground for accurate simulations of weapons, and with none of the unpleasantness associated with actually having to bring them here. The transactions themselves occur in an area of space more conducive to such business, meaning there's no legal problems, and Quark can focus on the stuff he does best, making the guests feel welcome so they buy more guns. Gala even says it was Quark's idea, explaining to Quark that he wants Smashed Badger to like him. It's working, too. Quark's first demonstration to a potential customer results in 2,000 sold space bazookas, a feat that leaves Smashed Badger impressed. News of more has him equally pleased, not that he entirely trusts Quark just yet. That's why he's using Quark's cut of the profits to pay off his debts, believing that someone with such baggage could be a potential liability. Once those debts are gone, Quark will get every slip he earns, but until then, a Smashed Badger will instead be demonstrating his approval with expensive gifts. O'Brien's winding down after work with a game of darts. Holding some pointy metal and a baby at the same time feels like a poor choice to Bashir, so O'Brien demonstrates what happens if Kirayoshi is put down, then gets back to the game. There's playing in Quark's quarters too, more specifically him on the receiving end of an air job. Quark enjoying himself means it's time for Odo to interrupt, and he doesn't disappoint. Quark's quick to point out that he's technically done nothing illegal. It's a position the Bajoran government seem to agree with, and Kira delivers the news with Cisco. A Smashed Badger sold some kit to the Bajoran resistance back in the day, meaning he's on their Christmas card list, and as such, free to conduct any lawful business he likes. Neither Kira nor Cisco are impressed with those orders, and the latter makes it clear that playing nice with Quark is a thing of the past. Gala and Smashed Badger are understandably delighted. Others had told them supplying the Bajorans was a mistake, but Smashed Badger understands having people indebted to you can be more useful than Latinum. Not that Latinum doesn't matter, of course, which is why he's very disappointed when he learns that one of his other associates was off having his hollybobs instead of conducting the deal he'd been sent to negotiate. That customer's needs have now been fulfilled by a rival, and Smashed Badger is not the forgiving type. It's important, then, that Quark gets this next job right. There's a very important visitor on the way, and one who insists on being treated in a very specific manner. On the plus side, Quark does have plenty of time to prepare, as everybody from Starfleet, and the Federation in general, has been avoiding his bar since the meeting with Cisco. Maybe the time to focus is a good thing, though. After all, he doesn't want to end up like the associate who disappointed Smashed Badger earlier, whose ship was reported as having a decidedly fatal malfunction after leaving the station. If Quark was hoping for sympathy about his situation from Dax, he's shit out of luck. Even the member of Starfleet most likely to cut him some slack has no time for him, which at least means he'll stop losing money to her at games of Cardi Spin Cash. Kirayoshi is fine. That's what Bashir says anyway, but he still won't tolerate being put down. Perhaps he's realized his dad needs to be worked to the bone in order to feel fulfilled and is just doing his part, though it's taking a toll on O'Brien. And working for Smashed Badger is taking a toll on Quark as well. Oh, he's perfectly able to take care of the important visitor we've got coming, a quick bribe of the guy's kitchen staff revealing his favourite dishes, but the actual business itself is more difficult to digest. See, the Regent here has a bit of a rebel problem, and led by one of his own former generals. Naturally, that's made him a bit miffed, and he wants to show this annoyance by killing a few of her people, and by a few, he means somewhere just shy of 30 million. Quark, balking at the idea, has Gala pull him aside. Okay, this guy might be a genocidal megalomaniac, but he's also got a fuck-ton of cash, and that's the important part. Besides, there are billions of stars in this galaxy. What's one world? The argument fails to convince Quark if his nightmare is anything to go by. Seeing all the people he knows blame him for their deaths is the final straw, and he wakes with the realization that he's rather bollocksed everything up. He's planning to do something noble, and what's the point of that if nobody knows you're doing it? That's the reason he's broken into Dax's quarters, ostensibly to give her his cardi spin cash wheel, but she's not listening to him. Throwing him out mid-heroic speech is the best he can manage. It'll have to do. He's off to see Smashed Badger with bad news. The virus our very important murderer wanted is out of stock, but Quark says he can get hold of something similar soon. All Smashed Badger has to do is keep him here to offer a demonstration. While he's doing that, Quark is introducing Gala to another guest. Meet the General our Regent is currently fighting, and someone Quark says we can sell our replacement virus to as well. That'll mean double the profit, as long as neither of them finds out we're dealing with the other. Gala's not delighted by the idea, but comes to accept that the only thing better than a shitload of money is 2 shitloads of money. It would be a terrible shame, then, if the two happened to accidentally cross paths, which is what Quark causes by arranging both fake demonstrations at the same time in the same cargo bay. He has the good sense to be leaving just as the General arrives, and doubles his pace once he hears the pooping start. Sisko's finally decided that O'Brien having Kiriyoshi accompany him all over the place isn't a good idea, and given him some time off. Nobody bothered to tell Worf, though, who's here to ask why he's not working on the Defiant. Instead, Worf's drafted into holding Kiriyoshi, while O'Brien sorts a bottle. Perhaps the new face confuses Kiriyoshi into silence, as it's the first time he's not cried after leaving his dad's hands. Putting him in his crib doesn't provoke crying either, meaning O'Brien gets his first proper rest for a while, and promptly falls asleep. It's more peaceful elsewhere on the station too, at least it is now all the fighting's stopped anyway. Sisko's trying to get to the bottom of things, with Quark explaining that his plan was just to make the deal fall through, rather than have them start trying to murderize each other. The Regent is now significantly less alive than he was earlier, but it sounds like it happened off the station, so nobody really gives a shit. That includes Sisko, who seems to have learned what the Regent had planned, and won't be shedding any tears. Gala and Smashed Badger barely escaped too, and Sisko thinks they're unlikely to come back, what with being chased by people loyal to the rebel general. That doesn't mean Quark's off the hook, though, and Sisko's hitting him where it hurts most, his wallet. He's on the hook for repairs to the cargo bay, but at least this creditor won't threaten to cut his thumbs off, so it's still an improvement over the start of the episode. And Dax is playing cardi spin cash with him again. She refuses to give the wheel back, but then Quark's always been more interested in playing the game than owning it, so we'll leave him to see how long his winning streak will hold, until the next adventure. We've been saying for a while on this channel that it's a mistake to assume Quark has no morals. Everything he does fits into his own strict set of rules and logic. There are times when reality forces him to step outside of those rules, to take choices that he otherwise wouldn't, but those little barbs of wrong will snag on his brain and force him to course correct when the chance arises, or when the discomfort becomes sufficiently great that he creates a chance. 28 million barbs, for example, are enough to make him create a chance at the risk of his own life. That raises an obvious question, though. How many of those barbs would he have been able to endure? Would 14 million have taken twice as long to quit? What about 56 million smaller ones, those deaths downgraded to injuries like he'd suggested? We don't know what his limit is because not even he does until it happens, though we do know this isn't the first time those barbs have proven too sharp for him. Some people look at this episode and argue it's an indication of how the Federation has influenced him, but we have previous evidence of that not being entirely true. Riches directly connected to death have been a sticking point for him since back in Season 1, when he believed he was playing a weird board game with people's lives. In fact, we know it goes back further, as we've had confirmation that he sold food to the Bajorans at only slightly above cost during the occupation. This was before we even arrived, so you can't blame the cloying root beer of the Federation for that one. Besides, I think asking how many people he'd have been willing to let die is missing half the equation. Those ethics are part of him, but they're not the only part. Personally, I suspect he'd have eventually stopped of his own accord anyway, even with just a single barb at a time, not simply because of the ethical aspect, though that would certainly be a part of it, but because I think he'd get bored. Quark has said previously that he didn't want to become an arms dealer because he's more of a people person, and I think there's more to that sentence than a simple excuse. Some Ferengi make money because it's what they've been told to do by the rules of acquisition, but like his mother once said to him, Quark understands the why of it. Not just the ideas behind the rules, but the drive behind the ideas, that need to play the game. His fundamental enjoyment of dealing with customers is due to them being a part of that game for him. Each new face that walks through his door is a fresh challenge. People enter with a set amount of money, and based on how skilled he is, they'll leave with less of it than they expected to. For Quark, being given money is good, taking more even better, but taking it all and then having them thank you for the pleasure, that is the pinnacle of true Ferengi talent, acquisition distilled into art form. As an arms dealer, that game would be largely played for him. He'll meet people he already knows want to buy weapons, and he'll sell them. It becomes an almost clinical thing, devoid of the give and take, the haggling, the upselling, the cajoling, all of the psychological manipulation that makes the game fun. He'd appreciate the money for a while, sure, and all the things it could bring, but I don't think there are enough distractions in the galaxy to make up for how much he'd miss the game. Those internal rules, just like his ethics, can only be ignored for so long. Just a couple of other points of interest to look at before we stop then, the first of which being the situation between Quark and Cousin Gala. One of the first things we learned about Gala is that he'd become successful partly due to a loan from Quark. That was arguably paid off with the arrival of the shuttle that was rigged to murderize Quark. Calling that debt paid is perhaps a touch generous, but I can imagine Quark not wanting to make too big a deal of it, what with the threat on his life and all. Still, we know that wasn't their final interaction, as we learned in Body Parts last season that Quark now owed Gala money. Quite how they went from Gala's attempted kabooming to lending Quark money isn't known, but perhaps fronting some cash was as close to an apology as Quark could get. Thing is, that episode ended with Quark being labelled verboten by Brunt, FCA, and having all other Ferengi banned from conducting any business with him. If that's the case, how is the previous debt still considered valid? Quark certainly seems to think it is, as he tells Gala he won't be getting it back. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Even if seizing all of Quark's assets wasn't partly for paying off creditors, there'd be no way for another Ferengi to collect that debt directly without being in violation of the FCA ban. It's not the only puzzling plot point about debts, though, as Quark says he's going to lose the bar due to loans secured on it. Except that's not possible, as the bar is a leased area of the station and not owned by him. If you'll cast your mind back to the last season, you'll recall Sisko used this fact as a threat when Quark was having Union trouble. This one at least can be put down to a bit of the old fraud on Quark's part, but it's odd Dax didn't pick him up on it. Perhaps she felt it would have been tactless under the circumstances. Speaking of Dax, the last point then is something I noticed in her quarters. Not a lot of people seem to have physical books in the 24th century, so it was welcome to see them in her home, perhaps even as a little nod to her extended lifetime and unique appreciation for the past. It's something I'd not noticed before, so I went back to check on previous examples. Sure enough, we see them as early as Season 1, though Dax has redecorated since then from the looks of things. It makes for a good example of subtle environmental storytelling, but it also raises another point about how many incidental details can be missed even by those who are studying things more closely than average. I wonder how many other little touches have passed me by over these 100-odd stories. End of episode.
I'm not sure we have any options left. I've consulted my reference material.
The Forbidden Library of Bum Books.
I told you we're not calling it the... Okay, fine, whatever. I looked at the books up my ass. There. Are you happy? Does it please you to lower the tone?
Actually, yeah, cheers. It's been a bit too highbrow for a while now.
Goddamn Philistine. Anyway, I checked, and I couldn't find any more interface options than the ones we've already tried. The late 20th century wasn't exactly a wondrous bounty of technological choices.
And there's nothing else from our time that'll plug into Windows 95.
Well, I did suggest the Skull port.
Piss off.
Then no, not really.
Hold on, not really into no, is it?
Well, there's always the nuclear option.
What's the nuclear option then?
We teleport into the computer. Woof.